What if everything you thought you knew about the king of rock and roll was just the glittering surface of a much deeper and darker story? At 88 years old, the legendary guitarist James Burton is finally breaking his decades-long silence, and what he reveals about Elvis Presley will shake you to your very core. This is not about the drugs or the fame or the Vegas years that everyone talks about. This is about something far more human, far more devastating, and far more heartbreaking than any tabloid headline could ever capture. Before we dive into video, please subscribe to our channel. James Burton was not just another musician who happened to play an Elvis band. He was there in the quiet moments backstage when the cameras stopped rolling and the screaming crowds went home. He saw the man behind the glittering jumpsuit, the iconic voice, and the legendary status, and what he witnessed changes absolutely everything we thought we knew about the king. For decades, Burton kept these intimate memories close to his chest, out of respect, loyalty, and love. But now, in the twilight of his own life, he feels the world needs to know the complete truth about his friend, the real Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley had everything that money could possibly buy: multiple mansions across the country, luxury cars that most people could only dream about, gold and platinum records lining every wall of Graceland, millions of devoted fans screaming his name from every corner of the planet, hanging on his every word and movement. But Burton reveals that behind those closed doors, away from the flashing cameras and adoring public, Elvis suffered from a pain that no amount of success, wealth, or fame could ever heal. It was not physical pain, though. That certainly came later in his tragically short life. It was something that ate at him from the inside out, a loneliness so profound and so complete that it followed him even when he was surrounded by thousands of people who claimed to love him. Burton remembers one particular night after a completely sold-out show when Elvis just sat alone in his dressing room staring at himself in the mirror with empty eyes. The guitarist walked in quietly, and Elvis turned to him with tears streaming down his face and said something that Burton has never forgotten in all these years. The king looked absolutely exhausted, not from the physical demands of performing, but from carrying the unbearable weight of being Elvis Presley every single day of his life. As the great philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once said, the most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you will never have. Elvis felt trapped in a version of himself that the world demanded that the industry created, but that he could no longer recognize as his true self. What people do not understand, and probably never will, is that Elvis craved normalcy more than anything else in this world, Burton explains with sadness in his voice. The biggest superstar on planet Earth wanted what he could never have again: to walk down a street without being mobbed by fans and photographers, to have a real, genuine conversation without people treating him like a god or a commodity or a product to be consumed, to be seen and appreciated as a person, a human being, not a phenomenon or an untouchable icon. This was the private pain that gnawed at Elvis day after day, night after night, year after year. He was imprisoned by his own massive success, and there was absolutely no escape, no matter how hard he tried. Burton also reveals something that will surprise many fans. Elvis constantly questioned his own talent and abilities. Despite selling millions and millions of records worldwide and literally changing the landscape of music forever, the king suffered from absolutely crippling self-doubt that plagued him throughout his career. He would ask James repeatedly if the performance was good enough, if the audience really truly loved him, or if they just loved the idea of Elvis, the image, the brand. He worried constantly that without the spectacle, without the carefully crafted persona, people would see him as just an ordinary, unremarkable man from Tupelo, Mississippi. In the words of the beloved poet Rumi, the wound is the place where the light enters you. But for Elvis, the wounds kept piling up faster and deeper than any light could possibly break through. The guitarist speaks with deep emotion about how Elvis desperately wanted deep, meaningful relationships, but found it nearly impossible to trust anyone around him. Was someone there because they genuinely cared about him as a person, or because of what Elvis could do for them professionally, financially, socially? This paranoia, this constant questioning, was not unfounded or irrational. People used him throughout his life, took from him without giving back, sold private stories about him to the highest bidding tabloid. Burton was one of the very few people Elvis felt he could actually trust, and even then, the king held parts of himself back, building invisible walls that no one could fully break down or climb over. Money and fame are often seen as the ultimate goals in our society, the things everyone should strive for. But Burton wants the world to understand they came with a price that Elvis paid every single day of his existence. The musician had completely lost control of his own life in ways that most people cannot comprehend. His schedule was dictated by managers and promoters who saw him as a money-making machine. His image was carefully managed and manufactured by people who cared more about profits than his well-being. Even his personal relationships were scrutinized, controlled, and often destroyed by the machinery around him. Elvis once told Burton in a moment of raw honesty that he felt like he was living someone else's life entirely, and that the real Elvis, the boy who loved gospel music, and his mama had died a long time ago. What breaks Burton's heart the most, even now, all these years later, is that Elvis knew how the story would end. The guitarist recalls multiple conversations where the king spoke about dying young, about not making it to old age, about burning out before he could fade away. There was a resignation in his voice, an acceptance like he had made peace with his fate. Elvis felt that the machine around him was too powerful to stop, and that he was just along for the ride until it eventually consumed him completely, which tragically it did. As the great Muhammad Ali once said, he who is not courageous enough to take risks will accomplish nothing in life. But Elvis had taken the ultimate risk with his career, his health, his personal life, and it cost him absolutely everything, including himself. Burton emphasizes strongly that he is not trying to paint Elvis as a helpless victim of circumstances. The king made his own choices throughout his life, some good and some terrible, and he had to live with the consequences. But the legendary guitarist wants people to understand the true human cost of that level of fame, especially in an era before therapy and mental health awareness were normalized or even discussed openly. Elvis suffered in silence because that is what men of his generation did, especially icons who were supposed to be larger than life, invincible, untouchable. Showing vulnerability was seen as weakness, and weakness was something Elvis Presley could never afford to show to the world. The pressure to maintain the image, to keep being the king, to never disappoint the fans, was absolutely crushing. Burton recalls how Elvis would sometimes have panic attacks before going on stage, not because he feared performing because he feared not living up to the impossible expectations that surrounded him. Every show had to be perfect. Every appearance had to be legendary. Every moment had to confirm that he was still the king, still relevant, still worthy of the crown that had been placed on his head when he was just a young man barely out of his teens. Burton also reveals that Elvis was deeply spiritual and struggled constantly with questions about purpose and meaning. He would read religious texts and philosophy books, searching for answers that never seemed to come. He wanted to understand why he had been given this gift, this voice, this ability to move people, and whether he was using it the right way. He felt guilty about his wealth when he saw poverty. He felt conflicted about his image when he valued humility. He was a man of contradictions, constantly at war with himself and the world around him. As the ancient philosopher Socrates wisely stated, the unexamined life is not worth living. Elvis examined his life perhaps too deeply, and what he found troubled him until his final days. The guitarist speaks about the toll that constant touring took, not just physically but emotionally and spiritually. Elvis was away from home, from any sense of normalcy, for months at a time. He lived in hotels and dressing rooms and tour buses. He ate at strange hours, slept at strange hours, lived a completely backwards existence. His body clock was destroyed. His relationships suffered. His health deteriorated. But the show had to go on because too many people depended on him for their livelihoods. Too much money was at stake. Too many contracts had been signed. Elvis was trapped in a golden cage of his own making. Burton remembers Elvis talking about wanting to disappear sometimes. Not to die, but to just vanish. To go somewhere nobody knew his name or his face. To start over as a regular person with a regular life. But he knew it was impossible. His face was too famous. His voice too recognizable. There was no escape from being Elvis Presley. It was a life sentence handed down the moment he walked into Sun Studios and changed music history forever. Sometimes Burton would catch Elvis staring out windows with the saddest expression, just watching normal people live normal lives, and the longing on his face was absolutely heartbreaking. The isolation that Elvis felt was profound. Even surrounded by his Memphis Mafia, even with women who claimed to love him, even with family members, he felt fundamentally alone. Nobody could truly understand what it was like to be him, to carry that burden, to live under that microscope. Burton was perhaps one of the few who came close because he witnessed it firsthand, night after night, year after year. He saw the toll it took. He saw the light slowly dimming in his friends' eyes. He saw Elvis becoming a shadow of the vibrant young man who had burst onto the scene with so much hope and joy and pure talent. What makes this revelation from James Burton so powerful is the timing. At 88 years old, he has nothing to gain from speaking out. He is not selling a book or promoting a project. He simply wants Elvis to be remembered as he truly was a complex, beautiful, deeply wounded human being who gave everything to his art and his audience. Burton wants younger generations to understand that fame is not the fairy tale it appears to be, that success comes with costs that are rarely discussed, that the brightest stars often burn out the fastest because they give so much of themselves that nothing remains. Burton also shares that Elvis had incredible kindness and generosity that often gets overlooked. He would give away cars and money and jewelry to people he barely knew. He supported countless charities quietly without publicity. He treated his band members with respect and paid them well. But even this generosity came from a place of pain. Elvis was trying to fill a void inside himself by making others happy. He was searching for meaning and purpose through giving. He wanted to be loved for who he was, not what he represented, but he never quite believed that was possible. The guitarist explains that in Elvis' final years, the pain had become almost unbearable. The physical pain from years of punishing performance schedules combined with the emotional and spiritual pain created a perfect storm. Elvis was exhausted in every possible way. He had given everything he had to give and the well had run dry. Yet still the demands came. Still the expectations remained. Still he was required to be the king, even when he could barely get out of bed. It was a tragedy unfolding in slow motion, and everyone around him could see it, but felt powerless to stop it. Burton wishes he had done more, had said more, had somehow broken through to Elvis in a way that might have changed the outcome. But he knows that some pain runs too deep, and some traps have no exit. Elvis was caught in forces larger than any one person could overcome. The entertainment industry, the demands of fame, the expectations of millions, the legal contracts, the financial obligations, all of it created a prison with no key. And Elvis served his sentence until the very end, paying the ultimate price for being the king of rock and roll. Now at 88, James Burton carries these memories with a mixture of profound sadness and deep gratitude. He was privileged to stand beside one of the greatest entertainers who ever lived to play music with a true genius to witness history being made. But he also watched his friend crumble under pressures that most of us cannot even begin to imagine. Burton hopes that by sharing this truth, fans will see Elvis not just as the king, not just as an icon, but as a complicated, beautiful, and deeply wounded human being who deserved better than the hand life dealt him. So the next time you listen to an Elvis song or watch one of his incredible performances, remember that behind that amazing voice and magnetic presence was a man struggling with loneliness, doubt, and a despair, longing for a normal life he would never have again. James Burton's revelation is not a scandal or a cheap shock. It is a reminder that fame and fortune cannot fill the deepest human needs for genuine connection, authenticity, and inner peace. It is a cautionary tale about the price of success and the cost of living your entire life in the public eye, with no privacy, no normalcy, no escape. Elvis Presley gave us his voice, his talent, his passion, and his soul. He entertained millions and changed culture forever. But what did he get in return? Money and mansions, yes, but also isolation, pain, and a loneliness that followed him to his grave. Burton wants us to remember all of it, the triumph and the tragedy, the glory and the pain, because that is the complete picture of who Elvis really was. Not a god, not a myth, but a man who suffered and struggled and ultimately lost the battle against forces too powerful to overcome. If this story moved you or changed how you see the King of Rock and Roll, hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell, because we bring you the untold stories behind the legends you love. Share this video with every Elvis fan you know, every music lover in your life, and let us honor the King by remembering all of who he was, not just the image on the poster or the voice on the record. Drop a comment below and tell us what you think about James Burton's incredible revelations. Did this change how you see Elvis Presley? Do you see him differently now, as more human, more real, more relatable? Let's keep this conversation going, because the King's legacy deserves nothing less than the complete truth, the whole story. Thank you for watching, and always remember, behind every icon, behind every legend, behind every larger-than-life figure is a human story waiting to be told, a truth waiting to be shared, and a person who deserves to be understood. Not just celebrated. Elvis Presley was the king, but he was also just a man, and that makes his story even more powerful and important than any myth ever could.